I grew up on an island with one rule: never talk about the other island. I was born on an island that only really had one rule, the kind that wasn't spoken but lived in people's posture. The way their mouths tightened, the way their eyes avoided a certain part of the sea. We were never to talk about the island across the water. It sat to the east, a half-mile off our shoreline. You couldn't miss it. You'd see it from almost anywhere on our side, past the docks, over the tree line, from the cliffs on the northern edge where the goats grazed. It was always there, sitting still, never changing. A piece of land so close you could row to it in under an hour, though no one did. I can't remember a single adult ever naming it, not even once. And if you said something about it, even by accident, someone would shut it down immediately. Not angrily, just firmly, like flicking a candle out. One time when I was little, maybe 7 or 8, I pointed across the water and asked my mother if anyone lived there. She didn't scold me. She didn't say anything at all. She just took my hand and led me inside, like I'd asked where babies come from or what happens when you die. That kind of silence. Another time, I asked my grandfather if he'd ever been. He was cleaning fish out by the shed. He paused just a second too long before saying no, then added, "Never ask about it again." And that was that. It wasn't forbidden in the way dangerous things are forbidden. It was deeper. Like the island didn't want to be spoken of, and the people here had agreed to let it be. Our island wasn't big. You could walk across it in a few hours if you didn't stop. There was the village near the western bay, with its stone paths and wood-slatted houses, and the small church where we held market on Sundays. A few scattered farms, a fishing dock, and the old watchtower from before my time that no one used anymore. It was quiet, steady, the kind of place where every door creaked the same way, and you knew who'd passed by just from the sound of their cough. The trade boat came once a week, usually just before noon. We never saw where it came from. It always arrived from the mist. It brought flour, salt, oil, iron tools, letters sometimes, though no one in my family ever got any. It left with barrels of fish and boxes of preserved vegetables. No one ever left with it. Only the trader ever boarded it. He'd pass down the rope to whoever helped him load and unload, but no one else ever crossed the rail. We were a closed loop. We grew up knowing our boundaries: the sea, the woods, the cliffs, and beyond all of that, the other island, always watching, always ignored. There were 5 of us who couldn't leave it alone: me, Jonah, Sam, Eli, and Nathan. We were kids like any others. Too much energy, not enough fear. We ran barefoot through the brush, built slingshots from driftwood, dared each other to knock on the widow's door. We spent hot days pretending to be soldiers, and cold nights pretending we weren't scared of ghosts. We stole things, but nothing important. Apples, candles, once a bottle of wine we didn't even like. We were just loud, restless boys. Jonah was the biggest, tall for his age, shoulders already starting to widen like his father's. He didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. Sam was the quickest, always first to climb something, first to run, first to joke about things that made the rest of us squirm. Eli was quiet and careful, and always the one who asked, "What if?" before we did something dumb. Nathan was clever, sometimes too clever. He'd make up lies so good we believed them, even after he admitted they weren't true. And then there was me. I don't know what I was in that group. I guess I was the one who remembered, the one who carried it longest. We never said it out loud, but we all watched the island, from the rocks by the southern cliff, from the upper fields when the wind cleared the trees, From the shore, when we were supposed to be fishing, but spent more time staring at the horizon. We'd talk about it only when we were sure no one else was listening. Maybe it's a ruin, Eli once said. Like people used to live there, but something happened. Sam snorted. What? Like ghosts? Maybe it's where the traitor comes from, I offered. He never says. Jonah said nothing, just stared into the distance. We didn't speak of it often, and when we did, it was always with that half-serious tone kids use when they're testing how far they can push something without making it real. But over time, the idea started to settle, not in our mouths, but in our bones, like it had been waiting there all along. We didn't plan it then, but I think we all knew we would. It was Jonah who said it first. We were behind the storehouse. The five of us, perched on a broken cart that sank slightly in the middle, chewing through whatever scraps we'd stolen from our kitchens. Salted fish, hard bread, half-rotted apples that still had enough sweetness left in them to be worth the trouble. The kind of food that tasted better because it wasn't given to us. He didn't clear his throat or build up to it. He just said, "I think we should go," like he was talking to himself. No one asked where. We all knew. That silence, the way no one looked at each other, the way we kept chewing like the words hadn't landed, that was agreement. Sam spat a seed into the dirt. Tomorrow? Jonah still didn't look up. 2 mornings, before sunup. Nathan nodded. Eli wiped his hands on his pants. I didn't say anything, but I was already picturing the tide. We met 2 mornings later, just before sunrise, in the kind of pale, still light that feels like the world hasn't started yet. The moon was still visible, hanging low in the sky like it hadn't made up its mind to leave. The dirt was damp from night air, and everything around us smelled like the ocean. Not fresh like wind and salt, stale, like old ropes and barnacles and the inside of a bait barrel. We didn't bring much. A couple flasks of water, a loaf of bread wrapped in a cloth, some rope, a pocket knife none of us could use right. Eli brought his father's compass. The face was cracked, and the needle had a habit of drifting even when you held it steady, but he brought it anyway. Sam brought a hammer, for some reason, though he never said why. Jonah had taken the skiff from the far end of the dock, where the unused boats were kept. It wasn't in good shape, but it floated. That was enough. It creaked when we pushed it into the shallows, and for a second, I thought the sound might carry and wake someone. But the village above us stayed dark. No lights, no footsteps, just the soft hiss of water and the thump of oars against the side of the hull. We climbed in. Jonah and Nathan took the oars first, setting a rhythm without speaking. The rest of us sat in silence, our backs to the shore. I didn't look back. The water was colder than I expected, not freezing, but deep cold, like it came from underneath something. There wasn't much wind, just a faint breeze that moved in slow, irregular pulses. It brushed the surface of the sea in places. I watched the light from the sky ripple and disappear beneath the oars as we moved. As we got farther out, the shape of the island came into view, slowly, like it was pushing through fog we hadn't noticed before. I'd seen it all my life, but only from shore. Now, from the water, it felt different. Bigger, heavier. The trees formed a jagged silhouette against the sky, and the hills behind them looked like sleeping animals just starting to stir. The closer we got, the more it felt familiar. The shape of the coastline, the slope of the land. It was like rowing toward a memory, one you couldn't fully place until you were inside it. There was a moment, maybe halfway across, where I turned to look behind us and saw that our own island was already fading into mist. A low fog was moving in fast, curling over the water like smoke through grass. The beach, the houses, Even the trees, gone. Just a soft gray smear behind us. It looked farther away than it should have. Fins, Sam said, and he said it too calmly, like he was trying not to cause a stir. We all looked. Just to the right of the boat, something slid under the surface. Long, smooth. It passed without sound. Then another, and another. 4, maybe 5. Just below the waterline, circling in wide, slow arcs. I couldn't see their shapes fully, but they moved like they had purpose. Sharks, Jonah said under his breath. Blacktips, I think. Eli leaned forward. How can you tell? Jonah didn't answer. He just started rowing faster. So did Nathan. Neither of them said a word, but the skiff began to lurch forward harder with each pull. Sam reached down for the hammer in his bag and gripped it like it would make a difference. The boat started to wobble with the force of the strokes. Water splashed. The nose tilted. I tried to stay calm, but the air around me had gone thin, and every muscle in my body was bracing for something I couldn't see. The island was close now, close enough to see the rock line clearly. No dock, no paths, just broken shoreline and thick brush that came almost down to the water. A crooked tree leaned out over the water near a narrow stretch of beach, barely wide enough to stand on. It looked untouched, uninviting. Then came the hit. A soft thud, followed by a jolt that rocked the skiff, like we'd slammed into something just below the surface. "Reef!" Jonah barked. The boat tilted violently to one side, then the other. Water surged in through a crack below the center bench. Cold, fast, rising. Something heavy clattered against the boards, maybe the hammer. A second later, one of the bags split open and spilled across the bench. Bread, rope, the knife, all sliding toward the low side. "Out!" someone yelled. We didn't argue. We moved. The skiff was already sinking under us, one side dipping hard. I kicked off the bench and dove, not even sure if I was jumping or falling. Water swallowed me to the neck. The cold hit like a punch, and my breath locked up in my chest. Behind me, splashing, gasping, limbs crashing into water. I could hear it all, but didn't look back. The current fought harder than I expected. My arms were sluggish, my legs heavier than they should have been. I kicked toward shore, every breath shallow and burning. Something brushed past my foot, too fast to register, too soft to be a log. I didn't stop. The distance couldn't have been more than 30 yards. But it felt like swimming through glass, the kind that keeps pulling you down instead of letting you break through. When my fingers finally hit rock, I hauled myself forward so fast I scraped both elbows raw. I didn't care. I just wanted to be out. One by one, the others crashed onto the beach behind me, crawling, dragging, coughing up seawater. The skiff was already gone, either swallowed by the reef or drifting, half-flooded, back into the mist. None of us had our bags. No compass. No food. No knife. The hammer was probably at the bottom of the sea by now. Everything we'd packed was gone. We stood there, shivering, dripping, catching our breath. One by one, we looked at each other, counting. 5 of us. No one missing, no one hurt, at least not badly. Then we looked around. It took a few seconds before anyone spoke. "This is the same place," Sam said. Slower this time. "It's the same beach." It almost looked like it. Same crooked tree leaning out over the water, like it was eavesdropping. Same cluster of black rocks jutting up along the curve of the cove. The same soft slope leading into the tree line beyond. Even the shape of the shoreline felt familiar, like we'd looped through time instead of space. Jonah turned in a full circle, scanning the trees and the shore, and then the water again. "We didn't go anywhere," he said. His voice didn't sound angry. It sounded resigned. Eli was squinting at the ocean, his face tight. "We rowed across. We saw the island. We left." He didn't say it like he was arguing. He said it like he was trying to remind himself. No one responded. We started walking, slow at first, still trying to make sense of it. The beach looked nearly identical to our own, but it wasn't. The rocks were a little too sharp. The slope rose at a slightly different angle. The tree line was thinner. The color of the grass not quite right. Close enough to confuse us. Different enough to keep us on edge. There was a narrow path leading off the beach and into the woods, just wide enough for two of us to walk side by side. None of us remembered it being there before. The air was different as we climbed, heavy and warm, like the weather had changed without warning. The trees swayed gently, but the grass up on the slope moved just a little too much. Jonah took the lead, Sam just behind him, then Nathan, Eli, and me. We'd only made it about 30 or 40 paces up the trail when Nathan came to a stop. At first, I thought he was just catching his breath, but then I noticed where he was looking. Up the slope, toward the tall grass hugging the hillside. I followed his gaze and froze. She was so close. A very tall woman. She wasn't walking, wasn't moving at all, just standing in the grass, like she'd been waiting for us to see her. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the wind kept going like she wasn't part of the world. The grass around her swayed. Her dress clung damply to her legs, but she didn't shift, didn't breathe. Her arms hung straight at her sides, too straight, too heavy, like she didn't know how they were supposed to work. She stood maybe 10 yards uphill, close enough to see the wrongness in how she carried herself. Her posture looked almost human, like a figure drawn from memory by someone who'd never actually seen one. That's when I realized what had hooked in my brain. Everything around her moved, but she didn't. Not even a twitch. "Do you see her?" Eli's voice was low, tight, like he wasn't sure if he was talking to us or himself. Of course we saw her. None of us had looked away. It felt like blinking might break some invisible barrier and make her come closer. Then she smiled. I didn't understand why it made my stomach twist at first. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't monstrous. It was subtle, just wrong. Her mouth stretched into what should have been a smile, but the shape was off. The corners bent down instead of up, like someone had tried to mimic it from memory and gotten the geometry wrong. But the rest of her face, the parts that move when you smile, those were perfect. The cheeks lifted, the skin around her eyes crinkled. That mismatch was worse than anything else. Her eyes were kind, genuinely kind, not cold, not distant. She looked at us the way a mother looks at her children. There was warmth in her expression, and it made my skin crawl in a way I still can't explain. I can tell you this, if I'd known then what I know now about that woman, I would have turned and swum back out into the water. I would have taken my chances with the sharks, gladly. She raised her arm. The motion was slow, unnatural, like her joints didn't belong to her. Her hand lifted until one long, stiff finger pointed straight at us. We didn't scream. We didn't run. We just started backing away, careful not to turn around, like we thought not facing her would make things worse. Sam bumped into Jonah, who muttered a curse under his breath. "Why is she pointing at us?" Sam asked, barely audible. Nobody answered. I kept watching her finger. Something felt off. The angle. It wasn't quite right. Eli squinted, stepping half a pace forward. "Wait," he murmured. "I don't think she's pointing at us." I looked from her finger to her face. He was right. Her eyes weren't on us. They were aimed just above our heads. Her arm cut across the air in a straight line, not to us, but over us. That's when I felt it, that slow pull in my gut, the primal feeling that something was behind me. We turned, all at once, and saw 5 people standing in the woods behind us, just beyond the path, half shaded by the trees. Not hidden, just waiting. They looked like us, same height, same hair, same builds. But they were wrong in ways you didn't notice at first. The clothes were mirrored, buttons on the wrong side, shoelaces tied in configurations that didn't make sense. Nathan's double had a tear in his shirt, but on the opposite side, Eli's double stood with arms crossed like he always did when nervous, except the arms were reversed, left where the right should be. They weren't moving, just standing there, perfectly spaced, aligned, like mannequins arranged in a storefront. We didn't speak, they didn't either, just stared, expressionless, like they were waiting for something. I stepped back without meaning to. The crunch of leaves underfoot sounded deafening. The air had changed. Not colder, not darker, just wrong. Like the rules we trusted had quietly stopped applying. I glanced back at the woman. She was still there, no longer pointing. Her body hadn't moved an inch, but her head was pushing forward. Just her head, tilting, straining toward us, like it was being reeled in. Her neck stretched too far, vertebrae visible under skin that looked too tight to bend, like she was trying to close the distance without taking a step. Like she wanted to reach us with her face alone. She stared at us with that same backward smile, mouth bent into a shape sorrow should never take, and those warm, impossibly kind eyes. That contradiction, grief twisted into joy, settled in her face like it had always belonged there. Her eyes were on us now, not the doubles, us. I could feel the weight of her attention pressing against my chest. Eli made a sound, a sharp, shaky breath in that collapsed into a sob. Quick, uncontrolled. That was all it took. Her body didn't move. Her face didn't change. She just opened her mouth and screamed. It didn't sound human. It didn't sound like anything that should exist. It started low, like the groaning of a ship under pressure. Then it rose into something sharp and metallic, like rusted metal being torn apart underwater. The pitch climbed beyond what a person should be able to produce. We hit the ground instantly, hands to our ears. The sound wasn't just loud. It was inside us, in our bones, our teeth, our skulls. Sam was yelling something, but I couldn't hear it. All I could hear was her. And then it stopped. No fade, no echo, just gone. The silence that followed hit just as hard. My hearing felt muffled, like I'd been underwater. For a few seconds, I could only hear my own breathing, sharp and uneven. When I looked up, she was gone. And the others, the ones who looked like us, they were gone too. Disappeared without a trace, like they'd never been there at all. "I want to go back," Eli said behind us. His voice cracked halfway through. "We shouldn't have come here. We need to leave." None of us answered. We didn't have a plan for any of this. We didn't even know what this was. "I think we are home," Nathan muttered, but it came out wrong. No one agreed. No one even looked at him. Because whatever this place was, It only looked like home, and now it knew we were here. We had no boat, no choice, so we moved inland. There wasn't a conversation about it. No group decision. Just a quiet understanding that staying where we were felt worse than pushing deeper into the island. We didn't know what we were looking for. Maybe shelter, maybe sense. But doing nothing seemed like asking for whatever came next. The forest swallowed us quickly. The path that had been there a few minutes ago disappeared behind a wall of brush and bark. The deeper we walked, the stranger everything became. The trees were wrong. Not in obvious ways, nothing that would scream out to someone who just arrived. But we knew trees. We'd grown up climbing them, chopping them, counting the rings of ones that had fallen in storms. And these felt like copies, imitations, like something had tried to recreate them from memory and missed the proportions. Too many knots, branches that twisted back toward the trunk, bark that felt like damp cloth when your hand brushed past it. The ground was soft, but not with moss or leaves. It felt loose, like something had recently shifted underneath it. The air smelled like iron and mildew, and something sweet rotting deeper in the woods. Eventually, we found a clearing, no wider than a fishing boat. A fallen tree split it down the middle, half uprooted, with thick green moss crawling along its trunk like veins. Jonah sat down on it, hands on his knees, his face pale. "What the hell was that?" he asked. No one had an answer. Sam was pacing again, running a hand through his hair over and over. Eli stood with his back to a tree, eyes scanning the brush as if he expected the woman, or something else, to step through it at any moment. That's when we heard it. A click, soft, mechanical, out of place. Not a branch snapping or the wind shifting, but the distinct sound of a latch lifting. A door, opening somewhere ahead of us in the woods. None of us said to move toward it, but we did. No one suggested turning back. No one asked if we were sure. Maybe because saying it out loud would make it real, or maybe because that sound, the quiet, metallic certainty of it, felt like a thread pulled taut, and we couldn't stop ourselves from following where it led. As we moved, the forest didn't grow thicker. It grew darker. The light filtering through the trees lost its sharpness. Not just shade, like the sunlight itself had started to dim before it reached the branches. The air pressed in again. Not sharp like on the beach, heavier, like something watching had started to breathe. Eventually, the trees broke into another clearing. The grass here was shorter, yellowed and dry, crunching underfoot, and in the middle of it stood a house. None of us spoke at first. It wasn't broken down or ruined, just old. Weathered boards, sun-faded paint. A small porch sloped slightly to one side, and the roof looked like it had sagged a little in the middle, like something heavy had once sat on it. It looked like the kind of house someone might still live in. We approached slowly, cautious, not curious. Something about it made our steps slow down without us talking about it. I kept scanning the windows, half expecting someone to be standing just behind them, watching. Nathan stopped before the others did. He tilted his head slightly, then pointed to the corner of the porch. "My dad made a post like that," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. He walked a few steps closer, squinting at the frame around the door, then to the woodwork under the windows. "It's like our house," he said. "It's not the same, but it's close." He stepped up onto the porch. We followed, hesitant. None of us wanted to be near the place, but no one wanted to let Nathan go alone either. The door was already cracked open, just a few inches. Nathan hesitated anyway, like something might still reach out and shut it. Nothing did, so he pushed it open the rest of the way. The smell hit first, Just stale air and old wood, like a room that hadn't been opened in too long. The kind of place where dust doesn't float, it just settles into the walls. It looked small from the outside, but the inside felt deeper, bigger than it should have been, like the walls had stretched just enough to be wrong. Inside, the light was dim and orange-tinted, like it was filtering through the wrong kind of glass. The hallway was narrow, a coat rack on one side, faint scuff marks on the floor, a chair in the corner that looked familiar, though I couldn't say why. Nathan stepped in first. We followed, slow. Nathan was quiet. He was looking at the photographs on the wall. They were of his family, his parents, his sister, him. But everything was reversed. His dad's watch was on the wrong wrist. His sister's birthmark had switched sides. The smiles looked normal at first, until you stared too long, too symmetrical, too wide. To the right, a doorway led into what looked like a living room, mirrored. On our island, Nathan's living room was to the left when you walked in. Here, it was flipped. Not just the layout, everything. The furniture was the same kind. Not identical, but close. Same colors, same wear patterns. A clock on the wall ticked just a half beat slower than it should have. The painting above the mantel showed a landscape we all recognized, except the river ran the wrong direction. "I want to go," Eli said behind me. His voice was barely there. None of us answered. We just kept looking. The room held us. Not physically, but in that way a nightmare does, where the air feels thick, and stepping backward might wake something up. We weren't frozen, just slow, careful. Jonah was eyeing the bookshelf. Eli hovered near the fireplace. I stood by the wall, watching the second hand on the clock stutter with each tick. Sam moved toward the painting above the mantel, staring at it like he expected it to blink. No one talked. We were all too deep in it, scanning corners, studying the little wrong details, trying to figure out what this place was. Then Sam turned, brow furrowed. "Where's Nathan?" Every head snapped around. He wasn't there. He hadn't made a sound. Eli was screaming. But it wasn't just fear. It was pain. Real pain. The kind that stops sounding human. His arms pushed against her shoulders, clawing, slapping. Nothing that made a difference. His legs kicked out violently, his whole body thrashing like an animal in a snare. The heels of his boots barely scraped against the dirt as he was being held up. And still, she looked at us, like we were the ones she was holding. Sam made a sound, half a sob, half a curse, and stepped forward. Jonah grabbed his arm. "We can't," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We can't." But we all took a step anyway. I did. I felt my foot move before I meant it to, like something in me couldn't stand still and watch. Then Eli screamed again, louder this time, high and desperate, raw at the edges. The kind of sound that burns your throat even when you're not the one making it. He kept kicking, kept trying. She didn't flinch, didn't tighten her grip suddenly. It wasn't violence, it was pressure, steady, controlled, like she was soothing him into silence, one bone at a time. His screams of agony unraveled into a choking, broken gasp, like even his voice was giving out. Then we heard it, a single crack, subtle, quiet, like a thick branch snapping underfoot. Eli jerked once in her arms, then stopped moving. His head lolled against her shoulder. His arms dangled at his sides, empty of fight. She didn't stop smiling. She held him there, still watching us, her eyes locked onto ours, like she wanted to see what we'd do next. Her fingers brushed his back in slow, meaningless circles, like she was soothing him to sleep. Jonah stepped backward first, then Sam. I followed. I didn't even think. I just moved. The boat scraped against the rock as we pulled it into the water. Nathan hadn't spoken. I looked at him once, just once, and wished I hadn't. He wasn't crying, wasn't breathing hard. He was standing completely still, watching her. And there was something small and soft at the corner of his mouth. An attempted smile. Just enough to be seen. Just enough to be wrong. We climbed into the boat, pushed off. No one looked back except me. She was still standing at the edge of the trees, Eli's body limp against her chest. One arm wrapped around him like he was hers, and the other lifted slowly. She waved. We didn't speak on the water. None of us touched the oars at first. The tide pulled us gently, like the sea itself was too tired to fight. The sun had almost slipped beneath the horizon, casting everything in that strange, copper light that makes the world feel unreal, like you're seeing it through memory instead of your own eyes. Jonah finally took one oar, Sam the other. I sat in the middle, arms locked around my knees, staring at the ripple patterns trailing behind us. I don't remember when we lost sight of the mirrored island. I just remember the moment the real one came into view. The same island we left. Same houses, same hills, same docks. But we didn't come back whole. One of us was dead, and one of us came back wrong. There was a crowd at the shoreline, people from the village, parents, a few older brothers, a grandmother with her arms folded tight. They weren't shouting or pacing or scamming the horizon. They just stood there, like they'd been waiting. The boat scraped against the sand. Hands reached out. My father, Sam's mother, Jonah's uncle. They helped us out without a word, their eyes flicking from face to face, counting. When they didn't find Eli, no one said it out loud. They just knew. His mother began to cry, quiet at first, then sharp and shuddering. His father stood behind her, unmoving, staring past us at the horizon, like he was still hoping to see his son come into view. One of the older villagers, maybe the priest, maybe just someone who'd done this before, put a hand on her back and gently led her away. She didn't resist. She just let herself be led, walking like someone made of paper. Someone reached for Nathan and pulled him ashore, calm and deliberate. His mother rushed forward next, throwing her arms around him, clutching him so hard it looked painful. She was crying too, but it was different. Her hands twisted in the back of his shirt. But her face stayed tense, like she was trying to convince herself this was really him. Like she already knew she'd have to let go again. Nathan didn't hug her at first. He stood stiff for a second. Then slowly, he wrapped his arms around her. When she pulled back to look at him, something shifted in her face. Her hands stayed on his shoulders, but her fingers had gone stiff. Her eyes scanned him like she didn't recognize what she was holding. Nathan smiled. "You're holding me like I died." His voice was almost playful. Almost. He let out a small laugh, quiet, thin, like he wasn't sure if the joke had landed. It was too practiced. It started too fast and ended too late, hanging in the air, like it didn't know when to stop. His smile stayed in place, but it didn't settle right. The corners of his mouth began to pull down instead of up. At first, it looked like a twitch. Then it kept going, bending further, stretching the muscles in his face into that same strained expression we'd seen on her. A smile that was trying to mimic joy, but failing at the geometry of it. His eyes didn't match it. They looked heavy, glassy, and full of something that didn't belong in a smile. Regret, maybe. Or grief. He wasn't afraid. Just resigned. Like something inside him understood what came next and didn't try to fight it. His mother let go of his arms. She took a step back, one hand covering her mouth. Behind her, the others had already started to move. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't argue. It was as if the whole village had already made peace with what needed to happen. A few men stepped forward. Jonah's uncle, Sam's father, a neighbor I didn't know by name. Nathan didn't resist. He didn't ask why. He just stood there, shoulders low, his eyes still on his mother. One hand reached for his sleeve, another for his collar. They escorted him to the sea like they'd done it before. No ceremony, no shouting. Just the sound of the tide and the low murmur of footsteps on wet sand. They held him under until the waves stopped moving around them, and then they let him go. I still wonder if the real Nathan died in that house, or if we left him there, alive, watching us walk away. Sometimes I think what came back with us wasn't pretending. I think it believed it was him. We begged our parents to send someone back, a boat, a search party, anything. But they just looked through us, like we hadn't spoken, like we hadn't seen what we saw. By the next day, no one even said his name.